We are spending at least a quarter of our days online. There are some of us who will spend almost 24 hours online, working, teaching, connecting with the rest of the world. Now, of the time that is spent online, most of that time is actually dedicated to watching video material, audiovisual content. 2 billion people watch YouTube videos every month. And as per this study, 1 billion hours of audiovisual content is watched on YouTube every day. So if we are to look at the share of global mobile data, this even grows. It is worth noting that 63.4% of the 36.5 billion gigabytes that are used each month are devoted to video apps. This is exponentially more than regular web browsing. And again, please do not forget that in the Middle East, we are avid consumers of mobile connectivity. So, such figures beg a question. If there is so much content being shared and consumed across the globe, how is it being made accessible to people who speak different languages and who have different personal profiles? And how much more audiovisual content is being produced and consumed in analog settings, such as cinema rooms, museums, cultural venues, libraries, schools, just to name a few. We live intensively submerged in audiovisual environments which need the output to be provided and mediated by specialized professionals capable of translating, adapting, and creating content that is adequate for this growing market. And those are the people that we are training at TII, audiovisual translators, who will be definitely among the best professionals and researchers in the field in the Arabic context. So allow me to introduce you to our speakers who will be walking us through this exciting world of audiovisual translation today. One of our speakers will be Dr. Rashid Yahyawi, an assistant professor in the Masters in Audiovisual Translation program. Alongside him, we have another colleague, Dr. Ahmed Al-Adwan, who is also teaching in the MAT program. We have Ghanima Al-Tawil, who is one of our alumna and a teaching and research assistant among us. El-Madi Ibuk, who is a translator and interpreter in the Ministry of Education and Higher Education. Malak Latrus, an associate consultant in Portland Communications. Omama Osman, a copyright for Qatar Foundation Communications Department, and Arim Al-Adba, a senior translator with Qatar University Press. Thank you to our speakers. We are really looking forward to what you have to tell us in our webinar today. So let's get at it. And allow my first question to be directed to Dr. Amr. It's a very basic question, but for the benefit of those people who do not know exactly what we are talking about, would you kindly introduce us to what is audiovisual translation?
Thank you so much, Dr. Giselia. Well, audiovisual translation is a specialized branch of translation that deals with the transfer of content of multimodal and multimedia material into other languages and cultures. And as you know, there are many branches of audiovisual translation, but subtitling and dubbing are the mostly adopted ones in the Arab world. And for those who are not really aware of these terms, subtitling refers to the process of generating a written translation of the oral dialogue that is usually projected towards the bottom of the screen. And depending on the directionality of the language, we have interlingual subtitling, and this is when we subtitle from one language into another language. Whereas intralingual subtitling is a translation from one language into the same language. Now, on the other hand, voicing, which includes dubbing and voiceover, refers to the process of replacing the original dialogue by another soundtrack that is usually in another language.
Thank you so much for being so concise and telling us about the difference between subtitling and voicing. Now, if I could move on to Dr. Rashid, we know that these translations that mediate between languages also mediate cultures. And there is a lot that can be said for mediating for the Arabic context. Could you add and illuminate the challenges of mediating all these audiovisual materials?
Thank you, Dr. Jazia. Hello, everybody. I'm thrilled to be here and to discuss this very exciting topic. Indeed, language is by default ideological, and therefore translation cannot escape to be political and ideological, both as an activity and a process itself. It displays a process of negotiation among different agents, and the more distant the cultures are, the more it is apparent manipulation can easily happen in the process, just to serve the intended audience. And this is even more so apparent in the audiovisual context. On a micro level, you have the agents of the translators, the authors, the critics and publishers, etc. And you have at the macro level, you have the sensorial bodies, and you have the state policies. So ideology is concerned with the notion of power between people and groups and ideologies themselves. So they want to impose their worldview on others in more ways than other. And usually it's the dominating culture, the dominating literature that really tries to embed these messages in the literature, and then the translators carry those messages to other cultures. Now, of course, in terms of the Arabic context, most of the translation go into Arabic from the Western literature, Western media, and by default, I think the gatekeepers are there to filter the content which is not suitable in social, cultural, and religious context for the audience. But again, the audiovisual material is at the forefront of this minefield of manipulation. Now, sometimes it becomes very, very difficult for the translation or scholars or researchers to differentiate whether these ideological differences observed between the source text and target text are inherently subconscious, subconsciously kind of delivered by the translator, or are they intentional? How to go about this in terms of dissecting the text and finding exactly what the author or the translator intended to do with the text, then we need more kind of frameworks like this critical discourse analysis and the appraisal framework and the scopus theory, etc., to look at the text and dissect them properly to whether find exactly this message and how to deal with them in terms of domesticating them for the local culture or foreignizing them for the exoticness of the other, just to achieve that cultural equivalence in mediation.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Rashid. Dr. Amr, if I may come back to you just for a minute. I know that in your classes, you provide students with ample exercises where they can develop this notion of creating subtitles that are appropriate for the intended audiences. Could you very briefly just tell us how you get your students to understand the importance of translating beyond words and translating for culture in the audiovisual context.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jazeel. Well, this is a very important issue that subtitlers and translators have to pay attention to. And at Hamad bin Khalifa University and in subtitling classes in particular, we make sure that our students are not only becoming, let's say, translators, but also, let's say, bicultural by default. So our students are introduced to a wide, let's say, scope of audiovisual material belonging to different genres. For example, they subtitle feature films, comedies, sitcoms, talk shows, documentaries, and so on. Students, right from the beginning, they are introduced to the subtitling conventions that they should, let's say, abide by. And we usually make sure that they are aware of the subtitling conventions that are in use in the industry, in the Arab world in particular, and as well as the subtitling conventions that they are following at the college. We also introduce our students to the important role of censorship, and as you know, like censorship operates at 3 different levels. The level of the state, which is very, let's say, broad, and this actually, these governmental bodies would decide which audiovisual material to be broadcast, subtitled, dubbed, and so on. And the second, let's say, level of censorship is imposed by the subtitling companies and TV channels, where they oblige, let's say, subtitlers and AVT specialists to operate within, let's say, following certain subtitling guidelines and dubbing guidelines. And the third, let's say, censorship level is called self-censorship. So subtitlers themselves, dubbers and translators would still censor their work, even if they are not really told to do that. And this is extremely important. So our students get the chance to be introduced to, let's say, a variety of theoretical aspects and theoretical frameworks that would guide them while translating, and would give them or allow them to comment on whatever, let's say, strategies they opt for.
Excellent. And simply to make sure that us faculty are really conveying what our students learn, we have invited our alumni to be part of this conversation. And I'd like to introduce our first alumna to talk to us. And I believe that Malak, you were one of those students who analyzed the complex task of trans-adapting and trans-editing. And you were looking at how to trans-adapt for dubbing in the Arabic context. Nothing like real projects to allow us to understand what we are talking about. So kindly tell us about your project.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Jazeel. Yeah. So I focused my thesis on trans-editing the self, trans-adaptation for dubbing into Arabic in an educational context. So if we look at this title, we can break it down into 2 main keywords. The first being trans-editing. So what's trans-editing? It's a term coined by Karen Stetting in 1989 to describe what she called the muddled area of trans-editing. So we have translating and editing, you put them both together, that's trans-editing. She distinguished 3 areas of trans-editing, and they're cultural trans-editing, situational trans-editing, and cleaning up trans-editing. The second keyword is dubbing, which Dr. Amer already explained. Very briefly, it's the complete removal of an original soundtrack and replacing it with another one. So the motivation behind my descriptive research stemmed from my observation of my colleagues' work during our introduction to dubbing and advanced dubbing courses. We were given 2 assignments. The first was in a cartoon format. So it was This Land Is Mine by Nina Paley. It's actually one of her most famous works. It's basically a cartoon that portrays what she describes the history of Israel / Canaan / the Levant, with the Exodus song as the soundtrack. The second assignment was a religious debate, which included discussions or debates on Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. So other than the obvious challenging aspects of these 2 assignments, which are religion and culture and history, there were other constraints, if you will, that the students were going to face during these 2 assignments. And they were specifically technical constraints. So as I mentioned, one of the assignments was a song. So there was the discussion of whether or not the students are going to sing their translation and whether or not they were going to make sure that it rhymes. And the second, and for the second assignment, which was a debate, there were other constraints as there was going to be a lot of overlap between the guests. So I noticed in the first draft, the students made some changes. So initially they presented their work in the classroom with the professor and their other colleagues. And the final drafts were, for some students, almost completely different, which was very interesting. So some students omitted sections, their own translation. Some decided not to address sections in the source text, and others decided to alter their translations. In the beginning, I made assumptions and assumptions on the reasons why they decided to make these changes, but then I realized that it was not easy to understand. And of course, this called for further research and investigation. So by conducting qualitative and quantitative research, the findings of the case study revealed that students made a lot of changes for the purposes of ideology and manipulation, which we were just discussing. And it's very interesting because they made these changes in order to take into consideration their own target audience. Some of them thought that it was necessary to follow certain techniques or to use certain techniques such as omission. So they decided to omit what they thought were offensive sections or translations or passages on Islam, for example. Some decided to use euphemism in order that so in order not to sound too harsh for their target audience. Furthermore, there was a pattern of technical constraints, which was actually not part of Karen Stetting's framework. We had to add it in order to use her framework on audiovisual translation. We discovered that it was frequently recurring in both assignments. So for the first assignment, it occurred 34 times among 6 students. And for the second assignment, it occurred 182 times among 7 students. Of course, these are significant numbers for a small sample or a small number of participants. So to conclude, and building on Karen Stetting's framework of areas of trans-editing, a new framework of trans-editing was proposed. We decided to add technical constraints or technical editing because it serves to help audiovisual translation students and practitioners in analyzing the technical constraints that they may face while adapting for the purposes of dubbing. Of course, this only goes to prove the importance of conducting further research on audiovisual translation and the technical constraints in dubbing and investigating the possible solutions to overcome them.
Thank you so much, Malak. What you have just described to us is what we see as critical thinking, one of the most important characteristics of a highly competent translator. How do you see that being developed in young, forthcoming professionals? As a student, you gained that critical thinking, writing your reports, working on your assignments. How do you see this being replicated in workplaces to help young audiovisual translators to become more self-critical?
Absolutely. So I think one of the great things that we learned during our studies in TII was creating a perfect balance between theory and practice. So we did not only learn how to, we did not only learn how to subtitle or how to voice audiovisual material, but we also learned the basics of translation studies. And the fact that we have these two help us to go to our workplace and create content or audiovisual material that is to the highest standards. So, having these two, theory and practice, is really what helps us in the workplace.
Thank you so much. We have discussed the traditional types of audiovisual translation, namely subtitling and dubbing. But at TII, we are developing yet another area in audiovisual translation, one that is known as audiovisual translation for access. I'd like to address Ghanima, please. Ghanima, you have been an assistant both in research projects and in the delivery of classes. Because people don't really know much about audiovisual translation for access, could you summarize very briefly what we understand AVT for access to be?
Yes, okay. For audiovisual translation for access, it actually teaches the students less conventional forms of audiovisual translation. It's also known as intersensory translation, where we focus specifically on two types of translation, which is audio description and subtitling for deaf and hard of hearing audiences. I'll briefly explain what is subtitling for deaf and hard of hearing audiences. Subtitling for deaf and hard of hearing audiences differs from regular subtitles because we add information to subtitles. This information can include character identification. For example, the person or the character is not visible on screen, so we use methods of identifying this character. There are several methods in that we can use to identify a character, mainly tagging and use of colors. And another thing that is added is music. We add music to describe the atmosphere of the sea, or we use music, we add music, we describe the type of musical instrument used. And another thing that we do add to the subtitles is the prosodic features, such as tone of voice and everything that can be gained from information from hearing something, but not necessarily seeing it. And then the other type of access we do teach is audio description, which is adding the description to a film. It includes describing the time of day, the character, what is happening on screen, if they're dancing, if they're fighting, if they're talking, if they're sitting, if they're standing, if they're walking. We do all that kind of description, describe that. But it has its own limitations where we do not add the description to cover the dialogue or cover music that is relevant to the plot of the film or the a series that we're describing. But audio description is not only for films. Audio description is used in other contexts and joined with other senses, such as touch. Audio description is often connected to museums to explore works of arts and exhibitions that are displayed in museums. And in the College of Humanities and Social Sciences, and in PII in particular, we have worked on several venues connected with the Museum Authority.
Let me interrupt you if you don't mind, Ghanima. Yeah, it's fascinating to see that audiovisual translation is breaking down barriers, and that is making the world a little bit more accessible for people who don't normally enjoy the audiovisual experience to the full. We often ask, why would a blind person want to watch a movie? Or why would a deaf person need to listen to music? Perhaps it's worth thinking a little bit more about the beauty of making the world accessible to people who are very often excluded. I suggest that we watch a little video where we see one of those experiences.
The project is both academic and social. On the one hand, we are training people who in the future will be providing access services for culture in Qatar. On the other hand, we are empowering the people who don't normally appreciate art because they need to be mediated, as is the case of blind people. And then overall, it's raising awareness. The public in general, that we are all equal and we all have the right to access art, art being an expression of culture, and culture being who we are.
الحقيقة اللوحة اللي عجبتني أكثر شيء طبعا هي اللوحة الرابعة. هي الحقيقة كان شكلها يعني كروي، وكانت طبعا في الشرفة في أحد الأدوار، وكانت يعني جدا يعني وصفها ما شاء الله من داخل يعني كان لافت للانتباه، كانت واضحة جدا.
هذا الشرح الصوتي ما بيشرح بس المجسم كشكل، بيشرح ايضا الافكار اللي خلفه، لانه نحن بيهمنا كمان نوصل فكره انه هذه مجموعه الاعمال الفنيه اللي بالمباني بمؤسسه قطر ما انشرت على مبدا اعمال للديكور بس لتضيف ديكور للمبنى، وانما لتضيف معنى او بعد اخر. فكل عمل فني له قصة، كل عمل فني فيه له معنى، انه يكون هذا المعنى سهل الوصول للجمهور اللي عم بيشوف العمل الفني.
Thank you so much for sharing this video with us, Riman. Obviously, this is exciting for students who are in direct contact with the community. And community projects are a staple in our program. Ghanima, if I could come back to you again. We have other projects with other partners in Qatar, very relevant partners. Could you very, very briefly just tell us a little about who we've been working with and what we've been doing?
Yes, of course. We have worked with a lot of museums connected to the Museum Authority in Qatar, and the example as in projects similar to what was shown in the video. We also are working and have worked with the Supreme Committee for Legacy and Delivery and FIFA World Cup to provide towards providing audio description to for the fans during the World Cup in Qatar 2022. We have also worked with Doha Film Institute, our flagship project during Ajyal Film Festival, which is called An Inclusive Experience. Would you like me to say more about the inclusive experience for Ajyal?
Please do, because it's really a very unique experience that all our students have gone through across the years. Very, very briefly, please.
Okay, it's a project that started on the 3rd of December 2015 on the International Day of People with Disability. And it has been ongoing. It's an ongoing project every year since then. Students and alumni get together with professionals from Doha Film Institute to take new films and translate them into different formats. These formats include subtitling for deaf and hard of hearing audiences, both in Arabic and English, audio description, and Arabic International Sign Language. This is an event for students to work with real professionals and obtain real life experience in real projects. It's not just an assignment, it's something that they actually work and they experience working conditions for a real project. It is an opportunity for also the industry to learn what we are doing in our audiovisual translation program. I think you can see it now small sample of what we do in أجيال.
Yes, that would be amazing if we could see a little bit of أجيال.
أول مرة بالعالم العربي فيلم طويل يترجم بهذه الترجمة الإثرائية.
كثير رائع لأنك أنت عم بتخليه يدخل لداخل الفيلم ويعرف إيش تفاصيل الفيلم. كان أول يعتمد مع الشخص اللي جنبه ترجم لي.
ما ندخل نفسر للأصم بالتفاصيل، خليناه يدخل هو داخل حدث الفيلم، إحنا فقط ندخل في الحوار مش أكثر من هيك.
Remix lots of the actual feature itself in order to suit the tastes and the needs of the people with these disabilities.
لما اتفرجت على الفيلم اللي كان تم عرضه كتير رائع، إحساسي كان ممتاز وسعيد، وحتى المشاهد اللي كانت درامية أو مؤثرة كتير تأثرت بيها، لأنه وجود الترجمة فيها ساعدني إني أتابع الفيلم.
بصراحة بحس إنه لازم تعمم على باقي الأفلام عشان الكل يستفيد من تجربة السينما ويستمتع فيها.
It is always a pleasure to come back to these exciting moments. I know that people wait a whole year round to enjoy a film, sitting next to their family and friends and watching it, just like the rest of us. Thank you, Kanima. One very last question for you. Is this a regular feature? Is it easy to find accessible audiovisual materials in the Arabic context?
It's only regular during أجيال once a year. It's not easy to find accessible content in the Arab world. We do have a few examples where subtitles are used, not necessarily subtitles for deaf and hard of hearing audience, but subtitles used for Arabic content on Netflix. But other than that, it's very rare. Sign language interpretation is, of course, only on national channels, but we don't have anything audio description or subtitles for deaf and hard of hearing audiences on national channels. So it's only on Netflix, only recent programming, nothing that goes back more than 2 or 3 years.
So here is a call to those watching us. The time has come for us to develop and to offer these services across television channels, in other environments, in museums, in education. Dr. Rashid, as far as I know, there have been efforts to liaise with international partners to implement and increment the amount of accessibility services in the broadcasting environment of the Arab world. Could you very briefly tell us about it?
Yes, indeed. I think this stems from the fact of the little kind of baby steps that we were taking in terms of getting all this project and making people aware of the importance of universal accessibility in a sense of media accessibility to all. So we had approached local and international or regional entities. We had with the Qatar TV, Al Jazeera, etc. But the main, of course, the main body is the Arab State Broadcasting Union, Arab States Broadcasting Union, the ASBU, which is located in Tunis. And we had a very constructive discussion with them in terms of how to go forward with making media accessible to all. So we talked about human resources and setting up the technical kind of infrastructure. But then, of course, we emphasize the political will of the policymakers in terms of setting policies to cover all segments of society for media access. So we proposed to pilot one television station, and we were very generous to offer it to do it, pro bono. And we are hopefully in the process of setting that up. This will really set the motion going, and maybe other channels will definitely join. And by the recommendation of the ASBO, surely others will be on board.
definitely, I think the Arab world needs to get going so that we arrive at the standard of the rest of the European and North American or even South American contexts, where accessibility is already mandate. It is part of the natural offer of any audiovisual material, be it on television, be it online, be it in any context. And we tend to forget that audiovisual translation can play a very important role in education. We forget that people can learn how to read, people can learn and expand their vocabulary, they can learn about all the topics that are available out there through audiovisual material. And there is so much audiovisual material available for educational purposes, but so little of that material is ever used for the benefit of learning, in the sense of allowing people to learn using whatever style is their preference, is their ideal way of learning. I would now turn to Omama, and again asking for an example. Omama, you have conducted an incredibly interesting piece of research using audiovisual translation for education. A very unusual setting. I won't say more, I will allow you to tell us all about it.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Jo. It's such an honor to be a part of this community and to be here, whether it's current or future members. So I feel like in order for me to explain to you a little bit about the research that I've done in TII, I need to give you a little bit about the context of where I was in my life at the time. Because I believe that like true advancement of knowledge and true advancement of fields happen when you start to link things together and you start to make correlation, you start to bring your worlds together, and then that way you advance knowledge and you create new knowledge yourself. You're not just stuck in a bubble. So at the time when I was doing my master's at TII, I was also doing a fellowship with Teach for Qatar. So I was teaching in an independent school in Qatar, and I was a part of this young group of teachers who were there to affect real change in the classroom and to address challenges that are in the public system in Qatar, like a lack of motivation of learners, or like general like negative attitude towards school and towards learning. And at the same time that I was doing this and I was trying to create those fun projects for my kids or my students to interact with and to learn from, I was also doing my master's degree. And when I was doing my master's degree, I learned about everything that you and Ghanima spoke about when it comes to translation or audiovisual translation for access. And it just like opened my mind to the notion that translation is not just about words that you translate from a language to another. It's everything in life can be translated. Right this second, I'm translating my thoughts into words. I can translate a space to someone who can't see it. I can translate sound to someone who can't hear it. It just was very, like, it was mind blowing. And I was like, I want to share this experience with people around me. And I knew I wanted to do something related that would benefit the students in the class. So I noticed that in my classroom, my students were always lacking motivation towards writing class. Whenever there's a writing class, you'd see all kinds of complaints from my students, and I wanted to introduce audio description that Ghanima spoke about just very quickly. It's you taking a movie or an audiovisual material and you translate it into audio. So you write like a full script about the film, translating it to someone who can't see it. And I conducted this case study with my students where I had a pre and post motivation questionnaire. My whole whole goal was to measure if tasks like these that involves audiovisual translation could actually increase students' motivation towards writing and towards learning in general. The results were fascinating in so many different layers, because although I didn't find like a statistically significant difference between the results before and after, I learned that motivation is such a complex concept. There's this quote that I really like that says that motivation in real life is rather more complex than simply perceiving cause and effect. It can do, it has to do with something that evolves gradually through a complex mental process. And not only that, in interviews that I've done to evaluate my results, I found that my students they enjoyed the activity so much that they didn't even perceive it as a right activity. And I had all sort of results of them socially speaking, where they were like, oh, I've never actually met a blind person, or I've never actually been introduced to this whole field. So it was eye-opening to them, which I feel is a great success. And yeah, in conclusion, I just wanted to speak about like that multidisciplinary nature of translation. I feel like translation is a field that lends itself really beautifully to any other field. Whatever your passion may be, whatever your interests are, you can bring it with translation and have an adventure with it.
How inspiring, oh Mama. I look at you as a young teacher, as somebody who is molding the future, and it's looking brighter as I listen to your experiment. Do you see audiovisual translation and the exercise that you carried out, do you see it being implemented, easily implemented in the educational environment in Qatar and in the Arab world in general?
Definitely. So I've noticed that my students would talk to their other teachers about the activity, and the other teachers would come to me and be like, oh, could you explain to us what the whole idea is? They saw blind and sighted people coming to school to watch the activity that the students worked on, and they were intrigued to learn more about it. And I've tried it with a couple of other English teachers in my school, where we conducted similar case studies and similar activities with the students, and we found amazing results. But still, a lot of people don't realize the value of it, and research like this and more conversations about these topics could open the door to so many more activities, whether in Qatar, in the Arab world, or in the world in general. So yeah, definitely I see future for that.
Absolutely, Mama. I'm sure that this can be applied. Your exercise, your research can be applied anywhere in the world and be equally effective. We are talking about very interesting research projects. Allow me once more to remind the participants that you can talk to the panelists by directing questions to them in the Q&A section, just on the right-hand corner, bottom right-hand corner of your screen. Just tap in your questions, and at the end, we will be asking our participants to respond to the issues. Up until now, we've been talking about or right now, we were talking about a very practical, on-the-ground research project. But if we are to address the future, if we are to look at the way the digital world is moving forward, we need to look at research that is a little bit more technical, a little bit beyond the regular everyday life that we are used to. And this is where I would like to introduce you to our next speaker. We know that audiovisual translation has gone beyond the screen. We know that audiovisual translation is all about this dialogue between the human and automation. We are questioning whether translators will have a job in the near future, because everything is changing so dramatically. I would like to come back to Dr. Amer, if I may. A lot of investment has been made into developing artificial intelligence and in finding automatic translation and live subtitling. Where do you see us going? All these research projects, all these developments, are we losing our place as human translators, or are we having to learn how to work and research in new ways?
Thank you, Dr. Celia. Well, this is a very interesting and tricky question at the same time. And it has been the concern of so many translators recently. Now, I strongly believe that translation technologies, which includes machine translation, CAT tools, computer-assisted translation, and automated subtitling, are primarily designed to facilitate the work of translators and improve the quality of their work. To be honest, I do not see translators and translation technologies competing. On the contrary, I see them cooperating. And I even see translation technologies encouraging translators to acquire new set of information, skills, and techniques that would allow them to keep up with the constant technological changes that we are witnessing nowadays. So, for example, like the profile of translators that we are, let's say, in our minds nowadays, or what we are expecting from translators nowadays, is different from what we used to have, let's say, 10 or 15 years ago. And translators have to learn all these translation technologies, in order to secure their job and in order to compete in the industry. So the bottom line is translation technologies would definitely help translators achieve more and improve the quality of their work in less time.
So we don't really risk losing our jobs.
No, I think translators are, remain, I mean, they would stay for many years ahead, because even if we use, if we adopt, let's say, translation technologies, we still need translators to proofread, to do post-editing, to, let's say, use the actual software that we are currently using. For example, we have cloud-based software, CAT tools, and we have desktop, let's say, software that would, let's say, facilitate their work. So at the end of the day, it's a matter of learning these new techniques and new software in order to be more productive.
Absolutely. Learning about new technology, working with the new technology, developing our skills is the way forward. And time is flying by, and I have to go directly to Elmeti. You are one of our bright alumni as well, and your thesis was particularly oriented to technology. Technology both as for receivers and for researching. It was innovative, it was different. Would you please tell us all about it, because you are really taking us to a new dimension.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Joselia, for allowing me to share with you my experience and my project. Well, my project started with one idea, because I usually use VR headsets during the weekends for entertainment. But what I mean by entertainment is not gaming, but I usually use for simulations, exploring the world, going into virtual tours. And it started with one idea, and it ended up, as you can see, with 7 VR headsets, 3 VR-ready computers, and a load of softwares, and the fortune I had to pay. But I was glad to pay them, because they opened the world to me and to others as well. So the best way to present my project, I thought that the best way is to take you into a journey where it will be a mixture of think aloud protocol and live simulation and demonstration, so that you can be in my shoes and you see what I did during my project. So as you all see, my project title is Subtitling Virtual Reality, subtitling a 360-degree video for exploring a viewing experience. So I will divide it into 3 parts. So we have subtitling, as Dr. Amir fully explained, and we have also eye tracking and virtual reality. So virtual reality, as all people usually link to gaming, it's more than just gaming. It's like it's a computer-generated 3-dimensional environment that can be interacted with by headsets like these VR headsets. This is the latest of the VR headsets, which is including a processor, so it's wireless. It does not require wire or a VR-ready headset. And also, because I used to watch documentaries, especially 360 documentaries, I figured out and I realized that usually they are only produced in Japanese and English. So there is no subtitling. It's only audio in original format. So I had that question, that if I would like to incorporate subtitling into those VR materials, so I had these 2 questions. Are the current softwares, subtitling softwares, are they compatible with this new mode of viewing and screening? If yes, can I have them? Are they? Can I process them? Are they doable? And also the second question for me, that if I manage to create like subtitles for 360-degree documentaries, are the subtitles going to affect the viewing experience? Are they going to add something to the viewer or distract him, for example, from the viewing experience? So I'll just give you an example, because I said we have eye tracking and we have VR, and I still remember something happened with you, Dr. Joselia, when I was talking to you about VR and how I can measure immersion and how can I measure the viewing experience. You said it's quite impossible, and I still remember it was in late October. I told you, just give me 5 minutes during the break, I will see something. And I looked on the internet, it was during the break, and I saw that there are some gadgets that they can measure the viewing experience, and by that I mean eye tracking. So I bought this one, this eye tracking. So this is a FOVI eye tracking. It's not a simple VR. It's a VR meant for creating VR content, and for eye tracking, it will record the eye gazes and the saccades of the viewer. And this cost me like around $700, and I had to ship it from Japan to my brother in the United States, and then he shipped it here to Qatar. So I'll just give you a demonstration of how eye tracking takes place. I'll just share the video. So this eye tracking, the one I'm about to show, it's not meant for the VR environment. It's only for 2-dimensional platforms like monitors that have X and Y axis. So
Eddie, we can't see your eye tracker.
Yes. Okay. After the eye tracking, I can disconnect it and show it to you.
It's perfect. Now it's perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
So now I will start with the calibration stage. As you can see, there is a green dot on the top that is moving. It gives me the optimal distance where I should be positioned. So once the eye tracking cameras are locked into my eyes, I can start the calibration. And now you can see a white dot that is appearing and disappearing. It's taking the dimensions and the calibration of my eye movements. So as you can see, the calibration is successful, and the green line is where I see actually, and the frequency where I saw first, second. So, and now I'll just give you a demonstration of how I track somebody who is watching a video like I did.
I am Fatan Ashur. I'm a full-time student and a freelance interpreter. Despite the demanding nature of its program, CHSS takes us beyond the nature of a classroom and encourages us to take every opportunity to build up long life leadership skills. My name is Yasmin Mishaira. HBKU provides students with a supportive environment and equips them with all the necessary skills and knowledge in their field. And employees are aware of that. So we discuss with them our career goals and various networking events. At HBKU, we are not treated simply as students, but as future leaders, innovators, and change makers. My name is Rajia Hassan. I'm a graduate of MA in Audiovisual Translation. I am a digital communication specialist at Qatar University. The Audiovisual Translation program sharpened my skills and broadened my knowledge in the field and supported my interest in accommodating the needs of the deaf community in Qatar.
So now I have recorded a video with using my eye tracking. So now we will display the eye tracking data, and I chose for the visualization of the data as heat maps so that I can understand where the VR user is watching and focusing. So if we see the analyzing data, the same video that I just recorded live in front of you, you will see the heat maps. You see the logo. Once the logo of our university appeared, I was focusing there. The same thing for the second footage where the Qatari flag is appearing. So when you see I will explain the heat map. The red color, it means where I focused most and I spent most time watching. The blue one, the more it's at the outer side, it means that I focused less on the area of interest, as they call it technically in eye tracking. So it shows where I focused mainly. If I wanted to see or analyze which area of interest I saw for a second, I could have changed the visualization into another format. It will not be in heat map, but in another format of representation. So as you can see, this is how we eye track a viewing experience. So, as I showed you, when I wanted to incorporate subtitles into the 360 documentaries, I chose two types of subtitles that were designed by BBC Research and Development departments. And that was the trigger for me. I was inspired by them to design those subtitles. But the fact that the BBC Research and Development Department, they only designed, they did not produce the subtitles, which made me very proud to be the first one who produced subtitles for VR content. So they suggested, or they designed 4 types in theory. Among of them, I only focused on 2 for my research projects. I will just show you the 2 types of the subtitles I used. So the first one is called the 120-degree subtitles. Why it's called that? Because you fix 3 identical subtitles in the spherical environment, where each subtitle is away from the other by 120 degrees, so that they cover the 360-degree spherical space in the VR environment. The second one is called the follow head immediately subtitles. It's only 1 subtitle, but it follows your head movements, whether you see up, down, in all axes, X, Y, and up and down, and even when you move. So these are the 2 subtitles I managed to produce. I said first that I was testing how compatible the current softwares could manage to produce those subtitles. Actually, I couldn't find any compatible current subtitling software to do that. That's why I had to be creative, and I used software Maybe those who are familiar with graphic design, they will know it. It's Adobe After Effects CC. So as I show you here, this is the life cycle of my research. So it started by creating the subtitles using the Adobe After Effects. Then I used the eye tracking, and then for 8 participants, and then I analyzed their eye tracking data, and then I sat with them for a semi-structured interview. So this is just a glimpse of using the Adobe After Effects CC to create the subtitles. This is only for the 120-degree subtitles. For the other one, I was lucky enough to find that it can only be created by a player, a VR player. Because I'll just give you an example. For example, if you have a glass and you have a crack in your glass, wherever you move, you will see that crack. So the same thing applies to VR. The subtitle cannot be created and attached to the VR content itself, but it should be linked to the player, because the player is the only device or the platform that can move with your head movements. So after creating
you are going into many technical details. Perhaps you could summarize your outcomes, if you could.
Yeah, sure. So after I created the 2 subtitles, I put them in the same documentary. It was a 6 minute long English documentary, and I made sure that each type of the subtitles will last for the half of the duration. And my participants, I put them into 2 groups. The first group, I put the 120-degree subtitles in the first half, while the follow had immediately in the second half. While the second group, they had the subtitles vice versa. They were switched. So when I gave them this VR headset to watch the movie, I did not tell them that I will be eye tracking them, and I did not tell them what kind of subtitles they are. I just told them they will watch a movie and it will have subtitles, so that I didn't want them to focus, so that I could have objective results. So after recording everything, and I asked them questions, and even my questions, I only chose 4 questions, but they were they revealed the viewing experience. So all in all, 7 out of 8 participants, they preferred the follow head immediately subtitle over the 120-degree subtitle, because it allowed them a freedom of mobility. They could have it allowed them to move, and at the same time the subtitle always appear under their sight level. And also my projects allowed me to discover that the human brain is processing 5 movements at the same time. I mean, the movements of the objects inside the VR environments. We have the movements of the eye, the movements of the head, and the movements of your body when you are rotating in a rotating chair. So all these movements, they are processed simultaneously by the human brain, and that's why I assume that only a moving subtitle will serve the purpose. So that was all in summary, in short, my project. And
a lot of thank you so much, Mehdi. What an impressive piece of research, and you have definitely taken us into the digital world. You have immersed us in 360-degree technology, in the state of the art. Congratulations for your work. I really hope that it is taken further into a PhD and into professional circumstances. I will be coming back to you in a while, because there will be questions. But I suggest that we move on, and we come back from this brave new world of technology. We come back to our small world, which is huge, of culture, and of our national culture, of the Qatari culture, because we can go full cycle. We can be in the digital world, but we will always continue to live in our cultural space. And I'd like to introduce you to our last project that we would like to share with you, and to another alumna, to Arim Al-Adba. And Arim has also taken on a very exciting project. Arim is a Qatari national and a very proud one too, and she has dedicated her research in audiovisual translation to transcreating or transadapting a book for the Arabic culture. So, and more specifically, the Qatari culture. Over to you now, Arim. We are looking forward to learn from you.
Thank you, Dr. Jazelia. First of all, it is so nice being here with all of you, and it's very exciting for me to share my experience in HBKU with everybody. My thesis idea was really inspired by my childhood. Like many others, I was a Qatari child who was raised in a rapidly changing environment that focused more and more on education and modernization and on knowing more about other cultures and on learning other languages and so on. As a result of that, I was always surrounded with images, with books, TV shows from Western cultures. Meanwhile, my own culture and national identity was fading away, unconsciously, of course. I now see myself in today's Qatari children who are also struggling with maintaining their own national Qatari identity amidst the strong focus on internationalism. So, as my master's project, I decided to address the preservation of culture and local identity through using audiovisual translation. I did that by taking a typical children's picture book like this one that is full of Western stories and imageries, such as the famous story, The Snow Queen. And I tried to translate the story, not only translate the story, but also adapt it into the local and traditional Qatari culture, transforming the Snow Queen into the Desert Queen. I wanted to take the readers of the story into a journey, moving them from one culture into another, from the West into the East, especially into the old, traditional, and humble Doha. To create that journey, I translated, adapted, and recreated the original illustrations that show Western and foreign imageries, and I made them specific for the Qatari culture, such as adapting, for example, the foreign natural environment that contains snow, forests, rivers, polar bears, and reindeers, and so on. None of these elements really exist in Qatar, and so they are not really relatable to Qatari children. And so I adapted them into the Qatari natural environment and re-illustrated them into deserts, seashores, camels, falcons, and so on. And the same went for adapting the houses and objects, as well as the characters, their appearances, their behaviors, into what is considered traditionally Qatari, Islamic, and Arabic as a whole. The idea and process of re-illustrating the images was, to me, it was fun because I've always had an artistic side that I always try to implement in all of my projects. And I had the opportunity to use my drawing skills and passion in this research project to domesticate a foreign story for a national cause, which is the preservation of culture. I also translated the words from English into Arabic, using the modern standard Arabic for the narration and also using the Qatari dialect for the characters' direct speech to add a local touch to the new Qatari story. And for me, it was important to recreate both the words and the images, because both of these elements really bear the responsibility of storytelling. And my ultimate goal throughout this project was to convert this Western folktale into a Qatari story, while making the style and aesthetic, as you can see, as close to the original as possible. I aspired for the end product to be culturally relatable for the young Qatari children whom are still building their identities and are still figuring out their cultural surroundings. And really this project taught me a lot, not only about audiovisual translation and adaptation, that was a given, but also it taught me about the concept of cultures and how they can be so different and yet so similar, where you can almost see two opposite images emerge into one universal image. It truly shows how translation connects individuals and worlds together. And yeah, that was my project.
How interesting, Aureen. If you could stop sharing, I would like to ask you a further question.
Yes.
Thank you. It looks very unusual when we are talking about technology, when we are talking about the media, when we are talking about the future. Why would you be researching in a program such as audiovisual translation? Why would you be working with books?
Well, books are still considered multimodal, and they can we can convert them from material like physical books into like audio books. We can add sound, we can add the speech. We can also, it will be very interesting to hear the modern standard Arabic for the narration and the Qatari, the national and local Qatari dialect for the characters. So really audiovisual translation can convert all sorts of things into digital and into audio and visual all together. So it's really multifunctional, it can be, yeah.
So what you are really telling us is that audiovisual translation is not all about technology. Audiovisual translation is not all about the digital world. Audiovisual translation, as Omama said it earlier on, we can be translating the world, which is naturally audiovisual. We can be constantly mediating the world's cultures, the environment, in communication in general, for the benefit of so many different people. In your project, we saw that you were singing a hymn to the Qatari culture. You are using translation to say to the rest of the world, we are a unique culture, and audiovisual translation is here to make us known to other cultures. However much I'd love to continue this conversation, I need to interrupt here to share with you some of the questions, and there are many questions that have been posed during our conversation. I apologize to those watching if we do not answer all the questions. What I suggest is that we continue this conversation after the session by continuing some way or the other using technology, because that's where we are living in the digital world, to continue discussing these themes because they are really here to stay. I'm going to take a few of the questions that are here. Most of them are not directed to one particular person, but I will try to direct them if I may. And I will probably start with questions which I think are directed. I see so many congratulations, wonderful projects, and this has been happening throughout the session. So mabruk to our alumna and alumni who have shared so generously your work. Fascinating project, excellent, wonderful project, congratulations, it's happening over and over again. Here we have a question and it says, it's not, I'll read it. Marhaba, the pictures that telling the cultural transition are really interesting. Thank you so much. It shows the human being exists independently from places and distances. Absolutely, audiovisual translation is here to mediate and make distance smaller in all ways possible. I think this one goes for the technology gentleman. Many thanks for the excellent contributions so far. Artificial voices and automatic speech recognition technologies are both making more of an impact in a few languages. English, first of all, but also French and German. Are you aware of similar developments involving Arabic? I think this is for Dr. Amr and Dr. Rashid probably. I am finding in my research group's work that speech technologies improve both the quality and the productivity of professional linguists in some scenarios. Dr. Amr, Dr. Rashid, would you like to respond?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Jazelia. Well, I think what he's referring to here is very specific and very technical. And when it comes to this regard, we are collaborating with institutions or institutes that work under the umbrella of HBKU, like QCRI, Qatar Computer Research Institute, where they have really let's say dedicated specialists working on software programming and speech detection and so on. So yeah, whenever we have projects that have let's say sort of relation to such specialized let's say areas, we work in collaboration with QCRI. We also offer our students let's say workshops on various technological, let's say, software or technical software, for example, re-speaking, like Dragon, where students get the chance to train software to recognize their voice, and they would be able to, let's say, have, let's say, oral dialogue written, let's say, on documents or Word documents that could be used later on.
I think if I might just elaborate a little bit on Dr. Amar's point there, is just again go into QCRI, which is the main focal point that we have in terms of research in speech recognition, and it's a massive project that's involving all Arab countries' dialects. So it's how to read and differentiate the different dialects between the MENA region, the Gulf region, and the Levant, etc., within using artificial intelligence. So I think we tested that one in one of the conferences in terms of the modern standard Arabic, but in terms of dialects, in terms of accuracy, I think it's getting up to 60–70%, which is very, very impressive given the variety of dialects that we have in the Arab world. And the accents themselves are extremely difficult. So I think the work is really catching up in this regard, and further research, of course, needs to be carried out. And fantastic in there. I don't know. I mean, the gentleman or lady who asked the question, if they wanted to get in touch, if there is anything we can collaborate, on with them. That would be fantastic, and we are available.
Absolutely. Still in the line of technology, there is another question about what can an AVT specialist do to minimize the inaccuracy made by technology? For example, with the automatic subtitling that we see in YouTube, for instance. Perhaps who would like to answer this one? How can we help technology to be better?
If I may, I think it's just, again, training the artificial intelligence, getting to know the terminologies and the context of the terminology within whatever context it is. It is very difficult for the machine exactly to realize which context this term is being used. Obviously, that's why the human factor is always going to be important, and is going to be there to guide the technology as much as the technology or artificial intelligence is progressing and helping the human. But I think the human factor is always going to be there, and it's going to be a prominent one in guiding or directing the machine.
I also just wanted to add to what Dr. Rashid said, that there are a lot of community projects that are being done across many websites. We've collaborated in a project where we were translating or cleaning up artificial or automatic translation of 10 articles. We've done the same for Wikipedia articles through another community project. There are always these little community projects that you can contribute with if you feel like you're confident enough to correct these translations that you feel are inaccurate. And if there isn't, you can always start your own, and we'd be available to help as well.
Absolutely. We could carry on, and once more, there are another 5 or 6 questions here that are begging to be answered. I apologize. We need to move on. We are coming to the end of our session, which I am sure you have all enjoyed as much as I have. I would like to ask our alumni one very, very last question, and this is only for the alumni. You are our future. You are taking the world by storm in all your passion and in all your enthusiasm. What excites you about the future of audiovisual translation? Where do you see us going? How can we change the world, which is always our motto at the end of the day? And Omama, I think you are desperate to answer.
Yeah, because I'm really excited at the number of research and the number of topics we get into. It's not like you're studying just one thing and you're applying it through one rigid box. And I'm fascinated by Alim's research, by what Mahdi shared. There's a lot of things that are going on. There's a lot of topics that are being discussed. And I think the future lies in us bringing fields together. Again, I keep coming back to this because I feel like this is where we're truly creating fascinating stuff. And I think that's where the future is.
Thank you, Omama. Mahdi, where is the future taking us? You and your technology.
Yeah, I think that the future will take us into a more immersive AVT, whichever the model is, not only related to VR technology. I think it will be immersive also at the simple level of a text. We will have more text in 3D text, even at the level of the sound. We will have Dolby Surround dubbings. We'll have all models that will make the recipient part of the process itself. The more immersive AVT is, the more the source text and the target text become one. And what I can say is that I have a slogan after I graduated from HBKU, is that everything is AVTable. So everything is AVTable.
Absolutely, AVTable. Perfect. The rest of you, Ghanima, what is the future of accessibility? What is the future for audiovisual translation?
The future accessibility is that we do everything for everyone. It's not specific to one audience, it's specific to all audiences. That's the future. We stopped just focusing on one group of people, and we focus on everybody and include everybody in everything that we do. That's the future.
Thank you. And Malak, what excites you? Where do you see the profession taking us?
I think, and honestly speaking, this is on the beginning. A few years ago, Bitcoin said that there were not too many people on this planet whose life is not being shaped by audiovisual texts, and that was already a few years ago. And if where life is right now with the pandemic and with how much we're consuming audiovisual material in general, we can only assume that AVT is truly thriving and the sky is the limit.
Absolutely. And Arim, last but not least, where is audiovisual translation taking us in Qatar?
Well, where can't AVT really take us? It can make us go anywhere and everywhere. If you want it in history, in culture, in sports, in education, in arts, in anything, you can find AVT there. So yeah, the possibilities are endless with audiovisual translation.
On that note, I can only end our webinar because indeed we are all so excited about the future. I would like to thank every single one of you, those who are attending, for having given us your time and shared with us questions and your interest. Our participants, my colleagues, our alumni, I'd like to thank you for your generous contribution to this discussion. The technical team that is hiding behind the system, thank you so much for helping us make this happen. And please do keep in touch. If you want to know more about our program in audiovisual translation, please do visit our website. We are still taking on new students for the coming academic year, and with so much exciting us about the future of the audiovisual world and audiovisual translation, I can only say I hope to see you soon, and thank you so much for being with us today. All the best. Thank you, everybody.